Hi, everybody. My name is Michelle Nichols-Dock, and I'm coming to you from the gallery at Tempe Center for the Arts. Thank you for joining us for our November mini draw-a-thon. We're calling this our senior edition. We have two fabulous artists for you today. We've got East Valley artist Beth Shook, and she is going to be drawing with graph paper and focusing on some details like how to draw hair on a hair rabbit. And we also have Kelan Nanny, Phoenix artist, and she really enjoys doing these abstracted spirals and floral designs. And so she's going to be sharing some of her techniques for that. So no matter what age you are or what level drawing ability you have, I think you're going to find some enjoyment with us today. You can draw along with us as the artists are speaking and showing you some demonstrations, or you can just sit and watch and enjoy the time that we have with some fabulous artists today. So we know a lot of people are at home. We're stuck at home right now and maybe feeling a little secluded from our family and friends. So maybe this virtual program might bring you a little bit of joy today and also inspire you to get creative and pick up a pen and pencil and start drawing. So we hope that you enjoy the program. We want to give a special shout out to the Pile Adult Recreation Center in Tempe, over by Tempe Public Library. We have some of their fabulous art students joining us today, so special shout out to them. Thanks for joining us. And we also want to, at the end of the program, talk to you about some of our virtual programs that we have going on here at Tempe Center for the Arts. We have music, we have dance, we have visual arts, a little bit of everything happening virtually. And hope you'll enjoy that. So I am going to hand the floor over to our first artist. Her name is Beth Shook. I've had the privilege of working with her for several years and have shown her work here at the gallery at TCA. She does ceramics, but she's also, I'm going to call her a master draftsperson. She draws like nobody's business, and I'm really jealous of her skill level. So, Beth, are you here with us?
I'm here. I'm here. Hello, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and show you what I'm working on right now. This is a drawing, and I'm going to let you, I'll talk a little bit while this is going on. So, as Michelle noted, I'm Beth Shook, and how complimentary, master draftsman. I never heard that before. I am a ceramic artist. I know that seems a little strange, but I draw a lot. And I'm going to be sharing today a little how to draw a fur texture or hair by drawing a hair, as Michelle mentioned. And I want to thank you guys for watching. Make sure that you ask questions if you have them. You can send them in and they'll be directed to us. And if you want to see more of my art that is not just this, you can see my work at bethshookart.com. That's my website. Or you can find me at Instagram at DessaDogToo. DessaDogToo, DessaDog2. And we want to make sure that if after you watched a few videos, unless you may be drawing along with us, you have a drawing, we want you to share those things and post them. And so be sure to post them and hashtag them with Draw-A-Thon or Tempe Arts so that we can see sort of where you're drawing and what maybe you've learned from here. So the drawing you're looking at now, it's kind of been staring at you a little bit, is a study that I've done for a ceramic drawing that I will make, yet to be made. And so I make some very detailed studies. So this is just a portion of a very large drawing. Large, it's about 28 inches by 30 inches. How's that? So it's fairly large. And so I make these detailed drawings from a photo, and we'll actually work along those lines today as we're drawing. And I do that because I need to learn the image and I need to learn the space. Because when I'm going to draw this on clay, clay doesn't use erasers. I don't have that privilege. Um, so, and I also use them for my notes because I'm going to create a drawing on a ceramic surface with glaze. And so that's very different than pencil on paper. So these detailed drawings really give me a lot of information. And so I treasure them. I actually save them a lot of, I have them for years. And the thing that is the best for me, besides the information I get for clay, is they help me practice seeing. And if we learn nothing today about texture or anything, I want you to take away that the practice of seeing will up your drawing ability tremendously. So, that's why we practice. I don't practice making marks on paper. I practice seeing and then translating what I see. So that's really one of the most important things that I've found in my drawing practice. So this study, I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about pattern and edge with respect to value. So in the drawing, you can see the fabric of the shirt is a plaid. And I was sort of cursing myself as I did this, but I did it for a reason. I wanted to play off that flat pattern. So, and the value on a pattern in a planar texture is different. And so we're going to talk just briefly about that because that's going to help you define other textures. So when I'm drawing a pattern on a shirt, I'm aware of how flat it is. So if you have fabric and you have a patterned fabric, there's a flatness to it. It's printed on the fabric. It might be woven in, but there's still flatness to it. And it's the same. But as soon as the fabric is folded or wrinkled or gets interrupted by a shadow or a bright light, as we see here in this drawing, you can see even my hair dropping down on there and creating a shadow. And so it shifts the value. Even though the pattern is consistent, it shifts the value. And so you're always having to compare, and this is important in developing textures, is always comparing the proximity values to each other. How light is this value compared to the one that's next to it, compared to what I think is the darkest value, so you're always having to constantly compare. And those comparisons help you create those textures. And you'll see here, I'm moving to the edge of my drawing, and you can see the wrinkles in the sleeve and how my pattern's exactly the same, but my surface has changed because of the folds in the fabric. And we're defining the edges of a pattern, and that's not necessarily what we're going to do in a texture. So that's why it's important to understand those things. Because when you're drawing hair, you're drawing negative spaces. You're not drawing the actual hairs, you're drawing the space around the hair, which is different than drawing a pattern because I'm drawing an edge and I'm drawing a flat value. So in doing hairs and fur, we want to develop dark spaces and we want to define light spaces. And so that's what's going to be a lot different than a flat pattern would be, even if the flat pattern's interrupted with a texture. So if you'll notice on this grid, this drawing in this grid, and they're numbered down the sides. It's an old technique and I use it a lot. It's a technique that was developed in the 16th century by Albrecht Dürer. And it was a way to establish correct proportion and foreshortening. And I draw it on my paper because I use a photograph. In the 16th century, they didn't have that luxury. So they actually had a physical frame with string, attached on it to make a grid and a fixed site. So they would set it between the artist and the model, and they'd have to look through the fixed site to create a grid over their model, and they would use it to correct their foreshortening. And I use it because I use it to enlarge my images. I'm working from a fairly small composite photograph, and I'm creating this large, 28 by 30 inch drawing. And it helps me sketch things out to the size I want them. and it helps me move quickly on my sketches so that I don't have to fuss proportions. I can move so much faster in that situation. So that's why I'm using it for the most part. I'm a little lazy to fuss around with it, and it helps me to make things the scale that I need them for the ceramic process.
Beth, I
That's
think the last thing I would call you is lazy, having seen your drawings in person. I also want to give a shout out. We do already have some people watching, and I want to say hello to Linda.
Hi, Linda. Right here, you'll see on the video, I'm showing you some of the supplies that I'm using. So pencils, I use a variety of pencils. I'll use a 2H, an HB, a 2B, a 4B, and a 6B pencil. And these are not like really good pencils for people that like draw all the time. They spend a lot of money on pencils. These are like, you can get these at any arts and crafts store for the most part. A little white plastic eraser, that's usually just to keep my page clean. And then little balled up dark eraser up there is my kneaded eraser. We're going to use that a lot when we're creating these textures. The drawing that I'll be working on is on 140-pound cotton rag paper. It's a little bit toothy, one side more than the other, and I'll use the side that's smoother. I would do want to note that that metal pencil sharpener up there, those are the best. They have such a sharp, create such a sharp edge on your pencil. It's unfortunate they don't have anything to catch with, so I'm always running to the trash can, but those are absolutely the best. The study you saw was created on some CAD printing paper, for lack of, I don't know what it's really called. I think it's called plotter paper, which is not generally used for drawing. It's recycled in my case. There's printed circuits on the back. My husband used to bring them home. And it comes very large. So they used to be, 3 feet by 3 feet. So I'm going to be working from a photo. You can see that I've drawn out my grid on my black and white photo. I've changed from the color photo that's up there. But it's important to see the color photo because I need to see the color value in the subject. So this hair that we're drawing, when we see light and darks in the black and white photo, that's just not shadow, that's color change. And so we have to know which it is. And we'll need to be able to compare our values as we're drawing. That's important because that photo that I've got down there has registered value differently than what we actually see. And we're going to actually revisit that idea. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but that's why it's important to have the color photo next to you. Now, if you're working by observation, you won't have the luxury of a grid unless you're going to do the 16th century deal. But it's easier for me to do it this way. That way I can make the drawing larger as well. And I was able to replicate this drawing of this hair several times pretty quickly because I had set up a grid and a system, and then I was able to redraw it pretty quick.
Hey,
So the
Beth, I
first,
just want to
yeah.
encourage people that if they have questions or comments,
Oh, yeah.
that they can write them into the Facebook comments section if they would like. And we will try to get those questions, comments to you.
Absolutely, because I'm all about answering questions, especially if there's things that you hadn't heard of before, or things that you're really curious about maybe doing or trying. So this is the first go through with this drawing of the hair, and I've used a 2H pencil and an HB pencil. So the H in my vernacular stands for hard lead, so the graphite's pretty hard. And as you move into the B's, the graphite is much softer. So I used an HB to lightly block out all the areas of the dark values. So pretty lightly. And so one of the things that you need to do is, especially when you're doing fur and texture, is stay within the direction of fur hair growth. So don't go against it. So it means you're going to move your drawing around for a lot for the most part. So once you've blocked out the areas, now I'm going back over here with a 2B pencil. So the B pencil is softer and I am not pushing hard, but you can see already that it changes the value that you have down there. I'm simply going over and over. But every layer of graphite pushes your value down, so you get a much deeper down. You need to keep an eye on your values, and that, see right there, I am making sure that I'm preserving light. So here's the thing, you don't get anything, I'm not going to use a white pencil on this to bring up highlights. My lightest light is the color of my paper. So I have to be very mindful of the white and the light that's left. So even if I have a middle range, I can't just jump in there middle range. I have to be able to pull some light up because nothing in nature is that flat, right? And so you're going to start to create some more definition into the darks. And as I move through these lights and darks, you'll see me come back over and over again with that eraser to keep from losing light. And it'll look like I'm going over the same things that I just went over, but you'll notice when I hit those lights, that pencil doesn't even look like it's making any marks. It's making a mark. And if I don't layer, I won't be able to remove. So I guess the key is, like, if I was pushing down hard, I wouldn't be able to pick up that with an eraser because I would have pushed down the tooth of the page and I would have laid down so much graphite that I can't get it up with my eraser. So by keeping my strokes light and just layering over and over, I can get my eraser and I can come back in, and I'm going to do it right now, and I can pull up and move back into that space. And I have a tendency to work on one end of that eraser. I don't, when I was in school, they would always like keep your eraser in your hand, and I would do that, but I don't like stretch it out and pull at it a lot. I'll need one end of it, and most of that is my hands are getting older, and it hurts. So I just sort of keep it in my hand to keep it soft, and I only need the top edge that I'm going to be using. So I want to be keeping that one little top edge, and I keep a sharp edge there, and work back into the values there.
Beth,
So I want to.
it sounds like you essentially are using the kneaded eraser as another drawing tool instead of thinking of it as a takeaway device.
You're right, and
Okay.
it's not about, like, used to be said, well, when I was little, a good artist wouldn't need an eraser. Oh, yes, I do, because I can't make white lines. I can't make, you know what I mean? So I'm using my eraser. It's another tool, and I'm bringing up the light again. I've got like so many pencils, and what about the gray in between that? What about the value in between that? So if I can use my eraser to pull off an edge to create a value that I wasn't able to put down, that's what I'm going to be able to do. So that eraser is essential. It's absolutely essential. And I have to tell you, they get really used. So I have a tendency to realize sort of after the fact that I need a new one because it's so dirty. It picks up so much work. One of the things, so as I'm working on the rabbit's, that hare's eye, he's really a hare, not a rabbit. And that surface is so different than the texture of his fur, but the same rules apply. I'm not pushing down on that pencil really hard. I want to be able to pick up a layer, even if it's just one layer, or find a spot where I can push down on the eraser to mask the whole thing. And amazingly, I'm not pushing down that hard, but you can see the value change as I'm working through this piece. So one of the things that the gridded black and white helps me, see where I'm at and check for value and check for proportion. For the most part, it's proportion. I have to have that color photograph that I have in there to check for value in color, because every color has a value as well. And it could all flatten out if I'm not paying attention. And you can see I just put lines in, I took lines out, and then I went back over them. Doesn't that seem redundant? But that is not redundant. It is.
Hey, Beth.
Yes.
Oh, we got a little pause here.
Okay.
Cody, are you still reading me?
Yeah, I
Are
still
you
have you,
there?
Michelle.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
there we go.
Now she's
We
back.
just got you.
Beth, we have a comment from your fellow
Yes.
artist Kelan, who's going to be doing the 2 o'clock.
Yes.
She goes back to talking about your grid, and she says the grid is such a great technique, and she's done a lot of murals, and she said mural
Yes.
artists really use grids to make their images in proportion. And then to transmit them into a larger scale. So she really feels like the grid's important. And then we also have a comment from Seth, and he says, "This looks amazing."
Well, thank you, Seth. It's going to look more amazing. I hope you're watching for the long haul as we go through this. And I will say to Kelan, I have done a couple of murals, and some muralists will be able to project an image, and I don't have the facilities for that, but I had a T-square and a pencil, and I gridded out. And I can tell you there's nothing more frustrating if you're doing lettering and trying to that's like cutting your own bangs. You get one side straight and one side long or whatever, but if you can grid it out, the letters are seamless and easy. Well, easy as the skill can be, right? So the grid is, I've had students say, but that's cheating. It's not cheating. You still have to draw every little part of the square of every little, and that's the point of the grid, is that you're just looking at the negative spaces in the grid and recording those. And magically they all line up. It's like a great puzzle. If you're looking at the video right now instead of looking at me, you'll notice I'm working around this little muzzle. Is it a muzzle on her hair? Well, the nose mouth part. And they're little sketchy lines. And the reason I'm doing that is there's some white whiskers that are going to happen. And I can't draw a white whisker. So the point is, with fur textures, you're not actually drawing the fur, you're drawing the space around each little hair on the fur. So I'm creating some depth that will eventually become, and you can see it's sort of starting to develop, those whiskers that are on the hair. And so that's how you're going to create those white whiskers. And you'll even be able to create the shadow that's cast, which will give it a lot more depth, because you're not actually drawing each hair. You're drawing around each hair, which just seems very odd. It's a strange, I think that's what a lot of people struggle with. Even if they can master the figurative form, it's what do I do with hair? And for me to tell you to draw the light and the dark and don't pay attention to the hair is really a difficult concept sometimes. But that's really what we're going to be doing this whole time. We're drawing the lights and the darks around the hairs. And you can see that little bit of nose is starting to take shape as we darken it. And that's where the shortest possible hairs are. But remember, there's like little shadows where the whiskers go in, and I'm only drawing those shadows because that's going to indicate the whiskers, because I can't draw the whisker. I just can't draw it. That's not there. I think at the end, there's a couple, when I finish up, you'll be able to see a couple of dark whiskers I'm able to lay in, but most of these were light colored, and really I have to draw around all of them. And so the short hairs around the nose, they're not smooth, but they're not as long as those that are around his face. And so pardon my hand when I get into my way. You know, when you're drawing, sometimes you don't realize how you're holding on to that pencil. And if you have any like problems with hands or stiffness in joints, I struggle with the similar things. And so sometimes I will make sure that I don't have a nubby pencil for sure. If it's really short, I try to get a pencil extender. They have those little things you can, and that helps me not bear down on that little tiny nib and cause any more hand pain. You can see the light hairs are starting to develop a little better as we're drawing around them. But they still don't have what they need yet. We'll get there. We'll get there. It's amazing the time it takes to develop. I'm still using that 2B pencil, which is sort of that middle of the road gray value. I shouldn't call it gray. It's just really a value. And I
Beth, I have
will,
a question. Is
yes,
that pencil extender that you mentioned, is that something that is readily available at a regular craft store, or is that more of a
yes.
fine art kind of thing?
You can get them at Michael's. You
Okay.
know, they have them as extenders. You know, I had a friend who used just to buy the leads and used in architectural pencils because you could load it like a mechanical pencil. And that helps too because you never had a nubby pencil at that point. You always had, but you know, then you have to deal with the weight of a mechanical pencil because some of those are a little heavier. Those extenders are great. You just plop the pencil in and, you know, pull it tight. It's got a little gasket on there or whatever, and it pulls it tight. And I've used them for the little nubs that because I don't have to bear down on that little bit of pencil. And that's incredibly helpful. My years as a ceramic artist have done a little enough damage on my hands that even drawing gets tough sometimes. So I just laid in some middle ground and then pulled it out just to leave enough in between the whites. So working up into the ear, you're going to notice that, so the ears get dark and I haven't even gone there yet, right? And the problem is there's fine little hairs that overlay the darkest part of the ear, and how to make those not be flat on the surface. You know, it's not a trick. It's like not, it's honestly, it's really about seeing what exactly are you seeing. Do the edges of the fur go to a deeper value? I mean, those things make a difference. You have to really, really look at, or was it a color change? Is it really turning back, or is there a color change in the fur? That's why that color image is so helpful when you're working both directions. So I'm having trouble here on the edge of this ear, making it look like an outline because it was white, but it's not as white as my paper. So there has to be some variation. And honestly, it's hard when you've never done it before to try to save the white, because, you know, it's real easy to just jump in there and realize later that, oh, I've lost all of my depth because I don't have any lights and can't go back. And so you'll see me fuss with this inner ear. So I move in there and I'm trying to leave room for the white hair that comes across. And I'll come back and I'll pull back. It'll look like I pull back almost everything I draw, but I don't really. I don't really. Again, you're probably missing some of the strokes are so light, you may be missing some of those strokes, but they'll show up again. If you don't go in layers like this, like I said earlier, you'll end up where you can't remove graphite from the surface, and that will be detrimental. You won't be able to get the lights that you need, and you won't be able to get the full range of values. And honestly, it's the full range of values that makes you see the textures, because without you, it'll look flattened out. It'll become cartoonish without a full range in your value. And like, I need to push this ear back, right? It's the second ear. I guess it's the second ear. It's the furthest ear. And so I've got to push it back visually. And there's fur in between that is lighter, but not quite white. So, you know, we'll be fussing with this a little bit. It seems like fussing, right? We've compacted this drawing into an hour, so, or a little less than an hour. So it'll be like Julia Childs putting the chicken in the oven and it comes out in 10 minutes. So, as we move along here, you can see, this is the
Beth,
thing,
I
you can
have
see
to
that,
say that I
yeah,
love that you have compared drawing to Julia Child's cooking, and you've also compared it to cutting bangs.
yes, you know, it's an analogy that can go so many ways.
It's so great. I love it.
But I remember watching Julia Childs as a kid, and you know, she stuffed the turkey and she put it in the oven, and she said, put it on 350 degrees for 2 hours, and then 5 minutes later she pulls out a finished turkey. It was great. So we're going to do a similar situation here, because this drawing will take you longer. So if you're drawing and using these videos, know that I didn't do this in an hour. So don't be discouraged when it's like, I didn't get that, because you need probably 3 times that much time to get this to happen, because it happened as fast as what you're looking at. So, and you know what I will tell you, do not be worried about stray marks off of edges, because they give the rest of that negative space so much life. And you'll see when I pull across the edge, I sometimes just let it go. Yep, there went one. You know, you've got all that space around your image, and it needs to just be as active as the image is. And otherwise, you know, we don't get to what was the use of paying for the whole page if you're not going to use it? I want to use all of it. And I know that looks like I'm not touching the paper with that pencil. I am. It is really create. And if you remembered back to the first one, so when you watch this later, when it's posted, and you can go back to see how different they look from what you've been witnessing. Here we are. This is Julia Child's in the making. We are going to get 2 different pencils, darker pencils, and we're gonna move on to, all right, so I've done my 2B over the whole surface, right? And that's where we got just with that light coloring. The darks are darker, further developed. You can see the lights are beginning to have some definition. We've blocked out the areas that we need to push back. I jumped right into his nose, you know, because I know that that's so dark. And so we're going to try to give the appearance of some depth and volume, right? He's still a little flat right now. So some depth and volume in the texture. So we're going to continue. So it feels like it's like second verse, same as the first, without darker pencils. Oh, here's an extension on this pencil that I'm using. This is my 4B, and you can see, Michelle, that extender. That's a nub of a pencil in there, and you can see the metal apparatus that holds on to it. And then it's got like the stick of a pencil there, and that helps me to not have to come down on that little pencil as hard. Easier on my hands that always hurt, but
I
you
love
know.
that because it's also, you're not being wasteful. Because, sometimes when they get too short and you're like, I just can't draw with this anymore, but there's still like, you know, there's life in
Yeah,
that
they're used,
pencil yet.
right. So I'm going to share this with you. I have a glass bottle that's got an old-fashioned stopper top. I don't know where I got it. I've had it for years. And when my nubs even get too small for the extender, and sometimes they've gotten so small that like they run out of lead, there's no lead left in the bottom, I stick the nub in that bottle, and I'm going to fill it up one day. It's not too far gone, but I will fill it up. But it's kind of a nice sort of milepost each time I stick a pencil in there. I have sort of that remembrance here. One thing you're going to notice as I'm working darker, that my eraser becomes important because I don't want to lose a lot of the lines that I've put in there. So I went darker, I came back, I went darker. And I'll continue to do that. And you can see that that surface is developing. It doesn't just look like scratchy lines as much anymore. And so we, you know, again, we're deepening that negative space around the hair instead of drawing the actual hair strand, which is, you know, hard to do. I know when we were younger and you were drawing hair, you would draw lines for hair, and that's the opposite of what we want to do. That's what we do when we draw patterns, like my plaid shirt that we saw at the beginning here. Make room for different textures on the eye. The eye is shiny and it's got fluid in it, and there's a shadow on it, and we have to remember that. And rabbit eyes in particular sort of bulge out, and so they catch a lot of shadow and duplication actually, and that's all from learning, like practicing seeing. You don't probably even recognize that if you were to look at a rabbit right off, but you practice seeing and how to make that happen. So I struggled with that little area I was in because the fur goes a different direction all of a sudden. And I think I probably come back and pull some of that out. But so here you can see I'm making decided choices to go around the lighter areas that I've saved a little bit. And you can see that happening. This pencil this is my 4B, so not my softest pencil yet, but leaves considerable dark. Around his eye, we've developed considerable dark, and here we're moving into those. You can see right there, I'm trying to develop those dark spaces, and the white spaces are becoming more defined. And that's important. That's the only way you're gonna create this texture. And I'm gonna pull it back out again. It's adding and subtracting. So art is math, and every art student will say, that's what I was avoiding, was math, but you're not. It's adding and subtracting. It's adding and subtracting.
You just
Constant.
ruined it for me, Beth. You talked about.
I know. You are not avoiding math. You are not avoiding math. My engineer husband would tell you that math sort of runs the world, and I would hate to admit that he was right, but he's probably pretty close to right. Everything can be figured with numbers. And you'll watch me here. You're going to see some of those marks come off the edge of the surface of this rabbit. That when I was talking about activating that space, because my goodness, you bought the whole page. So use the whole piece of paper and activate the space, make it interesting to come into the drawing. And so yeah, you can, there I go. I'm pulling it back off again. So, and you can see that I'm just using that edge of that eraser again, just to keep my hands more comfortable, and I'll be able to manipulate that eraser a little better. So, and one of the things, so you'll notice now he's starting to have a little bit of head separated from his neck or shoulder, because he's kind of got his head turned. So before it was a little flatter. And so that's good that we're to develop those lights and darks. So here we go into those whiskers, and you can see that the lines are a little more precision. Like I'm not just looking for dark space. I'm really trying to avoid my lights and develop those darks. I want to make those whiskers happen, because it can't be whiskerless. That just wouldn't be right at all. At all. Any more questions out there?
Well, not yet, but I was just about to encourage people to please question and comment, and we'll pass those on to Beth. I actually have one, and it has to do with your subject matter choices. That
Yeah.
many of the pieces, small and large scale, that I've seen you do, usually have living things. So it might be people, it
Yes.
might be animals, it might be botanicals.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming those are conscientious choices. And what attracts you to those subjects?
So well, first of all, I really love rabbits and hares, and I like hares in particular because they're very awkward. They're like Okay, here's another, simile here. So they're like they're like almost teenage boys. They're very awkward. They're very long-limbed, and I like that awkwardness about them. But for the most part, the rabbits and hares that I have in my work, because I'm always telling a story, rabbits and hares usually are me, because I'm pretty awkward as it is. And anytime you see a rabbit or a hare, it's me. And I probably suffer from that um, freeze or flight syndrome more often than anything. I rarely opt to fight. I either freeze and blend into the background if I can, or I run. Just sort of insecurities there. And sometimes you'll see, and I know you've seen this, Michelle, I've done a lot of birds, and birds represent in my work, generally, that's every man. That's, if you've ever read those stories about every man, and that is sort of society. And that's where those birds come from. And I have to tell you, botanicals, I didn't realize how much I loved gardens and flowers until I was much older. My grandmother, and I do the same thing. So I learned it from her. In Pennsylvania, she, had a beautiful garden, but come winter, all the bulbs would get pulled up and put in the root cellar for storage, and she would clip all of her botanicals and would line the windows of the sunny side of her house for rooting and propagation so that she could plant that garden the next season. And I remember all of those colors happening in the house all winter long. And I think that's my fascination with that, is the color situation that we deal with, and the textures, of course. And I have to say, when I plant my garden, I purposefully will plant um, color dichotomies. So I'll put colors that shouldn't go together next to each other on purpose, because it creates more visual energy. So I'm not the one planting all white flowers or all blue or all something. I'm putting orange next to shocking pink.
I love it.
And
And I
yeah,
love the story about your grandmother because, like, having known your work for several years, it all comes together in my head. I'm like, I see it. I see exactly what you're
yeah,
talking about. Yeah. For
yeah.
those of you who have not seen your ceramic work, that you're really
Mhm,
combining ceramics, found objects, your drawing
mhm.
techniques all into these really wonderful visual stories. So I'm going to encourage people to go to your website if you'll give it to
Thank
us
you.
one more time. And also, are there any places to see your work around town right now?
So right now, Practical Art has carries some of my functional wear. I'm a ceramic artist, so you can imagine I make functional work. Um, and occasionally they'll have drawings. I had a solo exhibition in there pre-pandemic in November of 2019, and some of that work still exists. I actually am taking work down to Tubac on Sunday. They have a new contemporary gallery that will be carrying some of my work. They're all drawn work, so no functional work there. And so those large scales, those drawings on ceramic tiles, large ceramic tiles, you can see there. You can always visit my website. That's bethshookart.com. And from there, you can find social media addresses, of course, and always feel free to contact me. If you sign up for my website, I send out, it's probably, well, lately, it's probably only been every 2 or 3 months, I'll send out an email if my web shop has been updated or have new work going on, or if there's a new exhibition coming up. I have a couple that I'm entered in, but I haven't heard back from notifications. So as soon as I find that out, I'll know if those pieces got in. So,
I'm
but
going to
yeah, and
people too, if they're interested in your work and seeing it in person too, is post pandemic. is to do studio visit. You know, that I know that
Oh,
you've
yeah.
participated in studio tours before, but
Mhm.
having visited your studio before, it's like being a kid in a candy store. You know, that it's really a lot of fun to see works that are available and to go into your ceramic studio and see what pieces you have in progress and the drawings that you
Mhm.
have posted on the walls. It's all this like really amazing insight into your process.
I think that is the most fun about going into a studio. So if you were just to see my drawn tiles, you might think, wow, how does that happen? You know, because honestly, I'm drawing on a tile, not unlike I'm drawing with this pencil on the piece of paper here. Um, but when you come into the studio and you see, so I keep all of those big drawings, those gridded big drawings, all of those are in my studio, and you're welcome to shuffle through them and look at them. I, do that. And post-pandemic, it was much easier to do. And again, we'll be there someday. It will happen again. I know the studio tour that I have done for several years will not be happening 2021 because there's still so much uncertainty about what all's happening in uh, in the world right now with the virus, and we don't want to put anyone at risk. There's too much that we need to secure and be good about saving here. So I think I'm still working with my 4B because I still have that. I'm going to come in here probably pretty soon with the 6B, which is my it's probably the softest pencil that I use. I can imagine that there are probably softer ones, maybe more expensive pencils. These are not expensive pencils. I perhaps, like, if I was just drawing as an artist on good paper all the time, I would be using better pencils. But these absolutely put down an image. I don't know that, you know, it needs to be an expensive pencil. And on this paper, because there's a little tooth on it, it's much easier to draw than I do my studies because it'll pick up everything pretty quickly. I'm defining a little under that jawline. I don't want it to blend in. He'll be a chubby rabbit. So this is my 6B. And if you will, I will not use this pencil that much. It's really soft. You can see how deep dark goes. I'm not pressing hard, really. Um, I, you would have to sharpen your pencil way too much if you were going to press that hard, and you would lose all your light. So this is just to get the deepest, darkest area. So you'll watch, I'm pretty sure I go around the eye, trying to catch those little whisker spots that get real deep in there. And I'll catch the deepest up in the ears, things like that. But you can see these little things that are details, small little spots. I will not probably, well, I know I won't cover the whole area like I have with the other pencils. I'll go over the darkest areas to provide some depth. So one of the things that particularly beginner students don't realize is how much difference you can get in dark areas. Dark areas shouldn't just be dark. So when you're working particularly like shadow or reflected shadow, and in the first drawing, when the fabric was folded, I had shadow upon shadow and reflected light. Your dark also has reflected light. And a lot of the times with textured areas, there becomes a flatness because we forget about reflected light in the shadow. And again, that's all about seeing and our need to see well, and really process what the shadow is doing. I sit and people probably wonder when they're watching me, well, my husband's really the only one watching me draw at home, but what are you looking at? And I'm looking intently at this dark space. I'm looking for where the dark changes and where the light is reflecting, because the light will reflect and change my dark areas. And that's what's really going to give you some volume. You have to really develop your darks, and that's going to help to create those light areas that pull up to the surface. And certainly have more definition in some of these whiskers in here. And, you know, you would think with this pencil that it would just be one stroke would make a really dark mark. And it would if I pushed on it really hard, but I'm not. I am going to be diligent to save my white and my light areas. It is necessary because you're not going to get them back. And if anybody out there is a watercolorist, they understand that if you lose your paper, if you lose your white, you're sunk, especially if you need it and you're not masking off. And it's an important skill to learn. It's pretty hard to remember sometimes. It's wanting to go in and dig deep, and it's not time to dig deep yet. So I'm pulling up so this area in here where I'm working, this is not shadow area. So I'm just changing value because on the color photograph, that hair has a different hair fur color over there. And it's a value changing color. It's not a shadow. And so that's why it seems a little flatter, but that's indeed what's going on there. So I'm again trying to save some of those long hairs that are happening. Going to pull back out again, adding and subtracting. Sorry for the math analogy, but that's what it's about, is giving yourself an opportunity and the permission to go in and out of this drawing and really develop the surface. I really want to get back up to those ears. I think it's going to happen here pretty soon, because then we can sort of see where we're at. And it's happening because the ears go pretty dark, and I want to see, and now your rabbit's upside down, but so when I'm drawing on my big drawings, I don't draw all over the whole drawing at once. Like, so in this one, we had blocked out with one pencil and then come back. And the reason I don't do that is because I don't want to drag my hand across the drawing. This one's small enough that it allowed me to go over the whole piece at one time. I do have a tendency on the big drawings to put a folded clean piece of paper under my hand while I'm drawing, so that just even the movement of my hand won't create any smudging of my light outline or my grid for that matter. And because so they seem really strange. The larger drawings move from one side of the page to the other because I'm right-handed. And this one, I have the ability to turn it around and fuss with it in every other, which is helpful, but you got to know that your rabbit's not upside down when you're looking at your other stuff. So you can see that the lines seem to now own their own space as fur. They seem to not just be foreground, middle ground, background. They seem to have they seem to own their own space. They have some body, and there's some volume involved here that we didn't have when we started. And it is really all about those darks and lights and layers. And so in his ear is really dark in there, but I don't want to lose the hair that comes over the top of it. And so it's hard enough to get in there. So I was concerned with his eye because it was so black in the photograph, but I knew it had more dimension than the photograph was giving me. So I wanted to make sure that I created those dimensions so that it wouldn't flatten out. And you can see there that the actual eyeball looks like it sits. So it's not just a flat black color. The shadow is different than the black around his eye. Really nice eyeliner look there, but that's how he is,
So when the photograph doesn't give you the information that you need, you're relying on your from life kinds of observations that you've done.
Right.
Like you were talking about before, of the awkwardness of a hair, being
Yes.
like a teenager, or the liquid that is in our eyes, of those are the kinds of things that the importance of life drawing can be.
Oh yeah.
Really
You can't.
valuable.
Yeah, you can't I mean, I suppose that you could always work from photographs, but there's something that's going to be missing if you've never worked from observation. I mean, I make a point in my sketchbook just to, sometimes I just draw the junk that's sitting on my desk just so that I can see things, like really look at what is the shadow doing? I need to learn those things and how that's reflected. If there's two lights, what does the shadow do? Because it doubles over. And I'm giving some of those black whiskers an opportunity to exist there. Those really dark ones that are just going to be lovely lines. And that's another thing, is knowing where they are and what direction they go. So um, sometimes I get really crazy ones going, but this guy was pretty specific. And you can see them play up against. So, and I'll come back and I'm gonna pull out and make some of these light ones as light as they possibly can be so that they can really sit on the top. That only happens if you've been light on your pencil, you've not really shoved it down there too hard. You can pull that back, and you've saved enough light back there to really give yourself a chance to create some whiskers, because the whiskers aren't all one color. They're very different colors indeed. So one of the things, and I'm going to show you this in just a minute. It's coming up. And it seems a little counterintuitive after we go back through this with this very soft pencil. So this is my 2H or my HB. Remember that first pencil we used that barely put down a line? It's got a hard lead, and I need a sharp edge. I need, like, there's very little sharp edges on these rabbits, but around that nose and that sharp edge where his mouth is. And so this is going to provide me some definition. And believe it or not, going over your soft lead pencil with this hard lead, and I'm not pushing down hard, it will make that dark that much darker, and it will really create a richness in the deep shadows and the darkest parts. So in just specific areas, and what it sort of helps to really define those edges, because my 6B pencil has such a soft lead that I can't get a hard edge. I can't get and you don't see a hard edge except like around a whisker, right? On the edge of his nose. And I'll probably come through it up by his eye. But, and even now it's like, what is going, like, it deepens those darkest darks. And these are pretty dark darks. And you can see that it provides just a little more depth. And it does seem like, wait, that's my lightest pencil. Yeah, it is. But amazingly, it will separate out your blacks. So you need to be cautious. Don't go over all of your blacks with it, but find the deepest part of your shadows and your blacks for your hard pencil. And it will help bring a little bit of life to those darks that you didn't have before. And amazingly so. It's just, it's sort of like the miracle. I can't explain it.
Beth, another question for you. Do you use your own photographs?
I do. And well, with the rat, yeah, I don't. I pulled him up somewhere, but when I'm doing my ceramic drawings, I use my own photographs. A lot of times they're composite photographs. So I've taken an image. I know what I want for an image, but it's not a possibility. Like, I don't know how to explain. The drawing you saw of me when we first started this video, I'm holding a fig leaf over my head, a really big fig leaf. Well, my fig tree didn't have big fig leaves, not like I wanted. So I created a composite photograph. And so I knew what the edges of the leaf looked like, where the shadow would fall. And I drew from there. So oftentimes I'll take artistic license. You know, I know what my light direction is for something. I know where the shadow will fall. I'm familiar with the form or the shape, and I'll push what I can to get away with, you know. So, But I try to work from my own photographs as much as possible. But yeah, no hair is going to stay still for me long enough. You can see how this part in his ear is getting even darker than it was with this pencil. And so this will, and I'm not pushing down really hard. I'm just going in there and creating some layers and definition in those dark areas. And there's a little fold in his ear where it comes in the middle, and you can see that it's a little lighter because it catches some light right there. And those are the things that you just have to kind of learn to see. I don't know. It's amazing. So I've given my students this project once about seeing color, but I think we can do this for a lot of things. And I told them one day to take their phone or take a camera, and I said, I want you to, every time you see red or yellow, I picked a color, take a photograph and compile those photographs. And you would be surprised at what this was for color theory class, you would be surprised at what we perceive as a color that really doesn't fall into that category. So we could say the same thing for a value, or if you see a cast shadow or something like that, then if you took a photograph, you could begin to see and observe. So this is the finished drawing, completely done, completely gone through. I've used my range of values. I've created some depth with my darks and pulled up my lights. You can even see sort of on what would be a cheek. They're the lightest lights of hair coming up because I've saved my white. And there's some great value range in there. One of the things that I do, and I'm going to show this to you here in a second, is I take a photograph of my drawing with my phone. And the reason I do that, I alluded to it earlier, is our eyes see value differently than our camera does. So not that our eyes are not as good as our camera, or our camera is somehow better, because I don't think you can improve upon a healthy eye. But the truth is, we take visual shortcuts. We don't necessarily see every value range because we can already perceive a circle, or we can perceive a square or an edge of something. And we don't have to use all of our visual cues because we understand that. So when I take a photograph, I can see where I've missed the mark. I can see. So here I'm going to take a photograph, get them in focus, take my photograph, and on my camera, and then I can compare and see exactly what's happened here, what's different in my photograph to what I'm really looking at. And it helps to develop my full range of motion, my full range of value. And so those are good tools to use. I'm glad you guys came today. This is pretty fun. I've had a
Yeah,
good time with you.
I love that last bit of using your phone because we've actually used that trick at looking at artwork in the gallery too.
Yes.
Is that everybody has different kinds of eyesight abilities as
Yeah.
well. And so I wouldn't hesitate to tell people, now using your camera inside a museum space is more acceptable
Right.
than it used to be because we can, control flashes and such.
Right.
But if you're not seeing some of the details that you want to see, like value changes, try photographing an artwork in a museum or gallery with your phone just to kind of pick up some of those nuances. And you'll be surprised what you can see.
It's
It's a nice tool.
amazing.
It's a nice tool.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And you'll be surprised. You'll know we make those shortcuts all the time,
Yeah.
Our brain gets ahead of us,
Yeah. Oh, we have a
That's why we
comment.
stub our
Uh,
toes. Oh, yeah.
a good comment. Oh, Donna tells us, I also rely on steady sketches before creating my free motion thread sketches. I can't pull
Ah,
threads, so it gives me, gives, so getting it right in the steady sketch is important. This has been very
yeah.
helpful and thank you.
Thank you. You know what? Paper's cheaper than so many other things. So I need to work it out here on the paper. And that's usually how it works for me. Yeah.
Well, let's give another shout out to Pile Adult Recreation Center
Absolutely.
students. and staff over there. I'm going to say hello to Diana and Amy, who helped bring this event together. It's been lovely working with them. And Beth, it's just
Yes,
been joyful. I know that you were nervous coming into
I
this.
was.
But you and I had a lovely conversation in the warm up, and it's just been delightful to
Yeah.
catch back up with you. You were part of our original Draw-A-Thon
Yes.
event in person about 3 years ago. So it's great to have you part of Draw-A-Thon again. So thanks so much for being part of today.
Thank you. This has really been fun. Yeah, I was nervous, but and I hope you've learned something new and maybe you want to try something great. I think, just keep practicing seeing, right? And put it down on paper and post them. Post them. Draw-A-Thon, #Draw-A-Thon, #Tempe Arts. We want to
We
see.
we appreciate that, and I just got a little note from our producer that I didn't turn on my camera during part of that. So thanks. See,
That's
it
all
just
right.
it, I made the glitch, you know. So hey, Beth, thank you so much, and have a fabulous
Thank
rest of
you.
your day. We'll check you out
I will.
online.
All right. Thank you.
Bye,
Bye,
Beth.
everyone.
And now we have the infamous or the famous, either one. I think she'll take it. Kelan Nanny. I've had the privilege of working with Kelan. I got to work with her a couple of summers ago for our draw exhibition and our first draw-a-thon. And she was an artist in residence with us. And we had a ball that summer. You and Monica Isa Martinez and Bobby Zukaitis, and we just had so much fun. There was laughter in the gallery. There was such great energy, and you're going to bring that same energy today. And you're going to be drawing spirals on map paper.
Right. Yes. So I have an example right here.
Okay, I'm handing the floor over to you.
Yeah. So this is what we're going to draw today. Before I show my video of what we're going to draw, I just wanted to show you a few different things. First of all, my backdrop here. This was a part of an influx commission with the city of Tempe. So if you've ever been to the Edna Weil Center, right on Mill Avenue in Southern, no, is it Rural and Southern, right? Rural and Southern,
Yes, rural and southern.
banners. Yeah, you can see these banners hanging on the side of the building. And I actually have one here at home. This drawing started out as just using markers on a map. And then I scanned them in my computer, and then we printed them large scale on vinyl banners. So we're going to use a lot of different materials today. I have a lot here. We're going to use gel pens. I love gel pens. Micron pens as well, or you can also use Sharpie markers. I also, if I'm doing something larger scale, I like to use Mr. Sketch markers because they're smelly. But you can use just about anything you want. You know, in the art world, I remember my professor saying, oh, you know, these things are no-nos because, you know, they don't stand the test of time. And it's true. If I were to put something in a gallery, I probably would be more concerned with the materials I was using. But since we have this whole digital realm now, and you can take a drawing that's made with markers and turn it into a large vinyl banner, really it feels like anything can go, which is pretty cool. There are lots of different ways that you can create radial patterns. And so I have some examples of my work that I want to show you really quickly. This one is one that I did, and I just pretty much hand drew the whole thing. I didn't use any special tools. I just drew all the petals and kind of worked it out. So you can just hand draw things if you want, if you don't have things accessible or fancy tools. This drawing I created using a spiral graph. And so if you've ever seen a spiral graph, I have this kind of new age one. Usually they come with holes in them, and then you put your pen in the hole and then you spiral it around. These actually have shapes. I really love these so much. You have to look under spiral draw, I think, instead of spiral graph, but these are fantastic to use to create spiral graphs. This drawing, I used just a compass to create the circles. And just by how I plotted the circles, it worked out that I could put these radiating patterns through the center. This one's a little bit more challenging, but you can always find lots of YouTube videos and things like that to see how to do that. And then my last one, I love this one because it's Tempe. The city of Tempe is all in purple. And then I think Scottsdale's in yellow. And I think there's a little mesa in there. So I love this one because it incorporates a lot of my worlds. I was born in Scottsdale. I teach in Tempe and I do a lot of work in Mesa. So all my favorite places. This one again was created with a spiral graph at first, and then I drew the radiating lines around it. So just as an example of some of my work, another thing that I've done recently was this drawing. I just created tracing things from around my house. So it was like the inside of a tape dispenser and the outside of a masking tape roll and the outside of a pizza cardboard thing. So I just randomly traced these things out. I didn't even align them so perfectly. I was trying to let go of being so, having everything follow like the center line. And it was a fun experiment to try with different patterns and pen and ink. So you can approach this in lots of different ways. One of the things, and I think Michelle's going to put this on the TCA website, is it's great to have just pattern references right with you. I work with high school students, and we just did a pen and ink project. And so this is one of the things is we made a pattern library. I have another one here as well. And so just having these kind of at hand helps you. So when you're going and you're coming in and designing each layer, you can decide what pattern you might want to use for each layer. So you don't have to do it, but I find that it's a great reference thing. One of my best friends here is my compass. I love this guy. I have a collection of compasses. So I do, small scale drawings, but I also paint large scale murals. So I have a variety of devices that help me do lines. When I do really large scale murals, I just take a nail and a long string, and I can make a handmade compass just out of a nail and string, which is pretty cool. My friend is my ruler. But you can draw straight lines on your own as well. And then I tend to pick up little templates. I look at the clearance sections at different art stores. And so I'll look for these. And sometimes I incorporate these into my pattern making too. It just depends. I like choices and I like a lot of variety. So I just try to change it up every single time that I'm creating something.
Kelan, are you also wearing one of your jewelry creations?
I am. I like to do a lot of painting with dots. And so this piece was actually, I took a photograph of a mural I did at Blick Art Supplies. You can see it above their spray paint cases. And it's 50 feet of dots. and these two circles that come together in the middle. So I find that drawing and painting is very meditative. I love what Beth Shook did. I love all types of drawing. It's very meditative. You'll find the thing that you really enjoy. I seem to like, my favorite tool is the one in my hand. So I can go, oh, I really love this one, but then I can switch gears pretty quickly too. I'm going to go ahead and start showing my video so we can see the whole thing. Excuse me reaching over here. So I'm going to expand my screen here and hit play. And so I like to draw on maps. I didn't have a ruler that was long enough, so I used a side of a piece of paper. And what I'm doing here is I'm putting a diagonal from corner to corner, and that helps me find my center point. Once I find my center point, I'll measure it. Sometimes I have a triangle, so I can just use my triangle. But for this, I had a ruler. So I just measured the line on the side, and then I made sure the far edge was the same. So I could make sure that my lines were perfectly straight. And then I basically make a circular grid. I will just choose like what size the center circle should be, and then the radiating lines around that. And sometimes like I'll do it and I'll be like, oh, maybe the space should be farther apart, or maybe the space should be closer together. And so sometimes I'll go back in and erase, but sometimes I like just the randomness of like trying to put down these radial circles and then working with what I had before. If you've ever used a compass, they're fairly easy to use. I find that if you kind of let them sit back a little and let them do their own work, it's probably the best. When I'm trying to control it a little too much, it gets a little trickier to do. I find the smallest circle is the hardest one to do with the compass. So I have my map now, all gridded out. So now it's time for decisions. For this guy, I did this drawing a while ago on vellum, and I was really inspired by it. You can see it's fully transparent. And then I put this blue piece of paper behind it. But I did this one and I really loved it. And I thought, okay, I want to do something similar, not exact, but something similar to this. And so that's how I came up with the idea for this. In the middle, I did half like each little pie slice to try to figure out what size to make those circles approximately. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's interesting because when I start and I do this middle, and you can see this here, the circles don't all look like they're the exact same size. But when you start drawing more and more of that pattern, it seems that because you're working with a radial structure, things get more locked down. And then I think your eye just perceives it as something that goes together, and no one's like criticizing, oh, that one circle is different size than that other circle. So, and I find that when I start in the middle, sometimes I'm like this part, I was like, oh, look, I didn't make that so perfect. It's more like an oval and not a perfect circle. So I kind of visually adjusted it where I made some circles smaller on one side and then I made them a little bigger on the other sid. And when you see it in its final product, you can't tell at all. So just be, when you're doing this and go, oh, this isn't right, that's okay. Just keep going. And kind of work it a little further to see. Sometimes I'll work it a little further and I'll be like, oh gosh, that really didn't work. But most of the time, I would say like 95% of the time, I'm like, okay, that works. That's fine. I'm drawing a circle.
You can just celebrate the happy mistakes.
Right. Celebrate the happy mistakes. Yes.
Yeah. Be a little Bob Ross. Instead of having happy trees, have happy mistakes.
Right. Happy mistakes. And sometimes those happy mistakes can actually lead you to learning something new. It's just another tool of problem solving, which is pretty cool. I'm like, okay, I'll just embrace this moment and then I'll see what I can do with it. So with this guy, I'm filling in the patterns in between with the black. I'm using a micron pen. I like micron pens because they're waterproof, and that's nice when you're working with a variety of mediums. They don't smudge, which is great. Sharpies work pretty well on this type of paper as well. I get maps. ASU got rid of a bunch of all their paper maps actually. And so they've been filtered out throughout the community. There are a lot of them at the Art Resource Center. So if you wanted to do this at a community center or if you had a nonprofit, you can go to the Art Resource Center and pick up. I went the other day because I'm doing a workshop with maps, and I said, oh, I just need 50, and she gave me like 100 because she has so many. So if you want to get some maps, you can. And if I've done these on dictionary pages. I've done them on lots of different things. And the way the map thing got started for me was I was doing a lot of mixed media projects with silk screening. And I started silk screening on maps just because of the texture of the map. I really like that you can see through them. I was silk screening birds on maps. So that makes sense because birds are travelers and you're traveling from place to place on a map. And so I started to do this, and then eventually I was like, well, what if I just started a drawing? And at that time, I took a trip to the Phoenix Art Museum, and they had an exhibit on op art. And with that exhibit, they had spirographs. They actually had these ones specifically, and you could sit down and draw. And so my daughter was young at the time, and so we sat down and we were drawing, and I couldn't stop. And my daughter even was like, okay, mom, it's time to go. So I had to go down. Thank God at the gift shop at the museum, they had the spirograph. So I bought one. And then that's when it kind of came together to start doing these, I started playing with the spirographs on the maps. And it seemed natural to put that image in the middle because there was a center line in the middle. So I was like, okay. And I've always loved to paint flowers. That's always been, when I was in high school, I loved Georgia O'Keeffe. She was my favorite artist in the world. And I wanted to go to college and I wanted to learn to paint like Georgia O'Keeffe. And I think when I got to college, my painting professor was like, oh my gosh, not another woman that wants to paint like Georgia O'Keeffe. So I really had to kind of diversify what I did. And I did a lot of like imaginary botanical oil paintings that had a Georgia O'Keeffe feel to it for a long time. But then like that just evolved into, I did a lot of graphic design in high school as well. And so for some reason, your style just evolves into these other things. And I've always loved to draw. That's always been my first and foremost thing. I consider my drawings really precious. I know Beth Shook said, she keeps her drawings for a very, very long time. I have a whole archive of all of my drawings. And so I do have a special relationship. When I was in college, my professors, a lot of them were like, well, it's really hard to have a career and draw. So, usually people want paintings, they want something more substantial, and it's better for the art market if you paint. And so, I did paint. I loved it, of course, but I always kept the drawings, and I was really happy to find a place where I could create drawings and then be able to sell them in a market and be able to convert these drawings into public art projects too. So it's interesting how like these things evolve that, and it's kind of the moral to the story is just because someone says, oh, that can't happen, or that, that's impossible, or there's no market for that. Well, things change. Life changes, and things
you just described the
Yeah.
success stories of all the biggies. That's how that happened, including Georgia O'Keeffe.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think about it. I know a famous ceramic artist, and he does, Kurt Weiser, and he does China painting on ceramics. And people were like, well, that's something old ladies do. You can't be a world famous artist by doing China painting on ceramics. And, he's a pretty big deal in the ceramics world. So
yeah. I think you could either buy a Porsche or
Right.
a Kurt Weiser, and which I love. And he's one of the sweetest people, and has great success, but hasn't let it go to his head. But yeah, those pieces, if you haven't seen Kurt Weiser's ceramic pieces, I encourage you to check them out. He's an ASU professor as well. But I'm glad to hear that story about him too, that he was told you shouldn't do this. And look at him now, and he's going like, ha ha.
I know. And I think about that because I teach high school and sometimes I'm like, well, you should go to college and you should And I remember my first year teaching or second year teaching, I had a student who was like, well, I just want to travel Europe. And I was like, well, you should go to college first. And you know what? He went to Europe and photographed and had a great time and was able to pay for it. And he's, a known photographer in the Phoenix area now. And I'm like, well, you just proved me wrong. Like, so
That's awesome.
I going to college, but I do also emphasize with students that there are lots of different paths to navigate being an artist. And so the most important thing is that you work hard and you try to make connections in the art world. So I'm like, I still do say college is good.
Education in general is good. And what we're doing today is a form of arts education.
Right.
And we want to give a shout out to our patrons and our friends over at the Pile Adult Recreation Center who might be watching, or anybody at home or at work that is tuning in to learn some new techniques or just to enjoy watching some great artists who are at the top of their game, doing what they do best. So we'll give those folks a chance to see more of your work. Thanks, Kelan.
Awesome.
Kelan, if you don't mind, I also want you to let us know what your web address is, how we see your work in person. You also do workshops, you teach. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. Okay. So first of all, you can check out my artwork by, you can just Google search my name and my website pulls up. The tricky point is spelling my name. So, but it's on everything here. So if you just Google search that, my website is just www.kelanmanny.com. Also my Instagram is my name as well. So you can follow me on Instagram, and my Instagram's kind of a combination of a few things. I post things that I'm currently teaching in class, and then I post, of course, different drawings that I'm doing. I have hobbies. I have art hobbies, so I love to collage. So I post my collages, and then of course I post things about different community interactive projects that are happening or public art that I'm currently doing as well. And I show my artwork at Art One Gallery, and I also have work at Practical Art Gallery. And I sell more prints and necklaces at Practical Art, and then I sell my original pieces at Art One Gallery. And I teach at New School for the Arts and Academics, which is in Tempe. And I have a number of murals. If you want to just get out of the house, I know one of the things that we do just for sanity purposes in this time is we go out in the car and we drive around and we look at all the murals around town. I have a mural at the Dahaba, which is on Apache Boulevard, right on the light rail line, just past McClintock. I have another one at Donnell Plaza. That is at Mill Avenue and Southern. And then the banners that I have behind me, those are on Rural and Southern at the Edna Vial. I also have some work downtown Phoenix, close to the Hyatt Regency. I have a number of murals down there as well. And so, I mean, I just love, also have a mural at Roosevelt Row by Mono Orchid. You have to drive down the alley to see it. But it is.
That sounds ominous.
It's actually a very, very nice alley. I worked on the mural sometimes until 10 o'clock at night, perfectly safe area. But you can drive, it's interesting around Roosevelt Row to drive, not just down the street, but to drive down the side streets, because there's so many interesting murals that are in that area. And also another place we always go is down to Grand Avenue. That has, Beatrice's hanging plants and her trees. Her work is a huge inspiration. Over this time that we've been at home, I painted a mural on the front of my house, which will gradually work its way around to the sides and the back of the house. And then I've also put all these hanging lanterns in my tree. And you know, I'm switching it up right now. We're kind of going into more of a holiday season. So I have a gallery in the front so people can see different work that I'm doing. I'm switching that out right now as well. So, but you can look at all of these things on my Instagram and see how it's all evolved over the time. So, yeah.
I love that encouragement of drive around. You know, a lot of us are stuck at home or we're feeling secluded from friends and family members. And there are lots of online maps. I know that Art Farm and Roadside Attraction, you've been a part
Mhm.
of that. And you put your own house on the map so people could drive by and see you don't even have to get out of the car to see a
Right.
lot of these artworks. And so if you're looking for something to do, but you're a little afraid of, you know, maybe going into a museum or going into a place, you can do this from the luxury and comfort of your own vehicle in Phoenix and Scottsdale and Mesa and Tempe, all around.
Yeah, I think that we really see the importance. I know that some people are like, oh, public art, it's not that big of a deal. But I think we're seeing like now, like, yeah, it's a huge deal. Like I mean, I always wanted to paint murals. I always wanted to do public art. It's always in, you know, in my dreams of things to do. I always felt it was important. But I know that, you know, it's interesting to see Phoenix and Tempe evolve over time because you know, 25 years ago, I wanted to paint a mural and I was working with a church to do it. And it was almost next to impossible to get it done because of the zoning and different things. And then now we're here and it's like the city like is like, sure, we need more art. Let's get on board. Let's have more art. So
Let's do it. Let's take over.
right. Yeah. And I think it's amazing. I'm so grateful for, you know, I think that the, you know, public, like, you know, everyone who lives in the areas, they want to see more art, which is fantastic. And I'm so grateful for all the coordinators because they do such an amazing job. You know, there's such diversity in the type of work that happens all over the town. It seems like, you know, they have workshops, you know, for artists of all sorts to be able to do public art. You know, for someone who really focused more on only drawing with their work, there are certain workshops that you can take so you can learn how to work with, you know, different people in the industry that use technology that could take your drawings and make public art out of them. So it's been really cool. I've attended a couple of those workshops. But it's amazing to see that, you know, it's not just encouraged. It's like, well, here, let's show you the tools so we can have more people doing this and have more art out there. Just,
Keelan, I'm going to encourage people that if you are doing your own drawings at home, inspired by today, or just whatever you're doing at home to be creative, please share on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram. If you'll hashtag Tempe Arts or hashtag Draw-A-Thon, then we can also share with our audiences. We really want to see what people are doing. And we also want questions. Please send us some questions and comments and we'll pass them on to Keelan. I have a little technical question real quick
sure.
about
Yeah, let's talk
the
about
gel pens. Um, uh, what kind of gel pens are you using and do they smear? Because I see your hand going over certain parts of your drawing. Are you
right.
waiting for that to dry before you do that?
Right. So this video, I did speed it up a little. I do wait for it to dry to an extent, but these are quick drying. These are my favorite. These are, I'll try to hold them up. They're Sakura, or they're Sakura gel pens. They actually were the inventors of paint pen or of these gel pens. They also make micron pens. That's what I'm using in this. So they also make these as well. And so, you know, they're just a business. They're from Japan and their thing is to make pens. And they make really great pens. So these gel pens, they do dry pretty quickly, but I do have to kind of make sure that I don't like smudge my hand too fast over something that I've just recently done. Plus, because the map has, it has a little bit of a tooth to it and it's absorbent, that also helps the drying time as well. So, and I love all the bright, rich colors. My favorite, they have different sets. You can get like the big box. It's $50. It's kind of expensive, but you can get these smaller sets. I get the midnight or the moonlight ones. And these are really nice because they're milky and they can go over black paper really well. They look like they're glowing, but then they look really nice on white paper as well. So if I were to go buy a pack, I would go get the moonlights first. And then they have other ones that are just your basic color pack, which is nice. But, you know, I've used things like just regular markers or Sharpies. Like I said, this behind me, I think I made this with like Crayola markers in the beginning. So you can really get a lot of different effects by just using some real basic supplies. I do want to note, like I'm watching myself drawing. And so one of the things that can be challenging is when you're drawing these archway shapes. They seem like when you try to draw them, they can be intimidating. But what I do is I usually will map out like where my line's going to start, where the middle is, and where it's going to end. And then I just draw a half circle here and a half circle there. And then I find that I can get better control over my line. You can tell in the video that they're not all perfect. They're not all evenly the same. If I wanted them to be evenly the same, which I have done in the past, is I could find some surface that was that shape, and then I could trace that shape. But you know, I find that sometimes when you're making a radial pattern, even though I'm mapping it, sometimes these lines, they get a little off. And so if you're tracing something, you gotta kind of shimmy it to make it work just right. So that's why I prefer to hand draw them. But it's up to you what you like to do. There's so many options. So you can see right now I'm mapping it out. So I put my dot in the center line, and now I'm going to use my big hand's in the way, so sorry. But I'm going to use a curving swoopy and like move my whole hand to meet it in the middle. And you'll see when I move my hand, like it's a little lopsided, but when it's all together, you can't see that it's lopsided at all. So I always have my inner critic happening, and your inner critic can be good, but your inner critic can also work against you. So sometimes you just have to say, it's okay, just keep going and see what happens. And so that's probably what I'm doing now. I'm like, oh, that line wasn't so perfect, but I'm just gonna keep going. So, and then the other thing that I wanted to comment is about my color choices. I choose complementary colors like to play off of one another. So I have this center with the orange and green dots here. And then I use the pink with the orange. And then after that, I use the green. And the green really, if you use complementary colors next to each other, like, you know, pink's in the red category, so it counts. But it will make things really visually pop for you as well. So that's why I chose to put this green here. And then I kind of reversed it back out by using the pink here and the green on the outside again. This layer, I'm doing kind of more of a cool color with the blue, but then I'm gonna come back in and put these orange dots at the top. And so again, that's gonna give it a little bit more of a pop as well. I like to use dots a lot. I love Indian radial patterns called rangolis. And it's interesting because those are sand paintings done on the ground. They're done by women. Women are taught from a very young age by their mothers how to create them. In some families, it's something you do before you go to school. You practice making rangolis. And they don't actually use any tools to make they make huge radial patterns on the ground in sand. You can look them up. But they actually will do a dot system by eye and make a grid with dots. And then they go back in and they start to connect the dots. And it's amazing to watch. It's first amazing to watch like older women on their knees on the ground using sand because it's very painful. But the other thing is it's amazing to see their technique of how they're able to keep everything looking that it's very symmetrical and it looks very even. And they're all doing it 100% by eye. I also love mandalas created by Buddhist monks. The sand painting that they do, they actually will measure it out and have it all mapped out like I did first. And then they come back in and then they use that really weird instrument where they pour the sand in and then they tap the instrument and it just puts a little bit of the sand out at a time. And it'll take them like, a week to make a 5 foot by 5 foot sand painting. And it's a point of meditation and prayer for them. And then once they finish it, they take a big brush and then they swirl the whole thing and then they dump it. And that's their way of saying, that nothing in life is permanent. And it teaches you how to kind of let go of the things that you can't control. So I love that idea in life. So I'm like, and I have seen a few years ago, they had some Buddhist monk at a gallery in downtown Phoenix, and they were doing the sand paint. It was amazing to watch them do. I've always wanted to try to do one. I haven't done one, but I'd love to sometime try it for sure. I've done large Rangoli or radial pattern paintings on the ground, but I've also, of course, done them on buildings. The mural that I have at Mono Orchid, it started on the building and then it continued on the ground. And so I'm always trying to figure out ways of how can I do more of these on the ground. I was really inspired by there was a show that Tempe Center for the Arts had, and Mary Schindel took her drawings. Do you remember this, Michelle? Of I think they were like cactus blossoms that were dried, and she drew
saguaro blossoms.
Saguaro blossoms, and then she printed them large scale on vinyl, and then her and a bunch of people she knew, she cut out all of these to be the shape that they were, and then she put them on the ground, right? Am I remembering?
Yep, I got to help install a few of them.
Oh, yeah, that was my inspiration.
From outside inside the gallery, and it was really lovely. Yeah, I think, and those media are just getting even more affordable. That was 12 years ago. And now, they're making glow in the dark floor media, and they're making
really?
Oh yeah, glitter and all sorts of, like, you would go nuts on it. Yeah. While we're at it, you and I will give kudos to Tempe Print Shop.
Yes.
The city has its own print shop for city projects and stuff, and they have helped on public art projects and helped on TCA projects several times. The vinyl banner behind you, I believe, was done by the city, by Jack Mingo and the city print shop folks. We'll give them a shout out. And that's another way that people can make temporary art. Speaking of temporary public art, we do have a comment. Donna says, I was raised in Phoenix, West Side, but now live in Portland's Pearl District, cool place, which celebrates public art in a big way. I admire and appreciate artists who make public art. It is such an important part of community pride. Thank you.
Awesome. That's so great to hear.
That was so nice. And Portland is like mega public art.
Yeah, I know. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Like I said, it was always something in my dreams. Like I said, 25 years ago, I couldn't even talk anyone into it. Like, come on, let me paint a mural on your building. But you know, there were a lot of associations back then, at least here in Phoenix, that, you know, if you paint murals, that is a sign that the area is run down and poor. And even like 10 years ago, someone was going to pay me to do a mural somewhere. I just had to find the business. And I went to a business, they had a huge white wall outside of their building. And I said, oh yeah, I have it all funded. I just want to use your wall. I'll incorporate ideas from your business in the mural. And they were like, no, we don't want heroin addicts hanging out in front of our business. And I was like,
Oh no.
heroin addicts necessarily. I'll be like, oh, mural, let's go hang out there. So I was,
Well,
yeah,
hopefully they
I just thought it
regret
was
it
an
and have a
interesting
change of
comment, to
mind
say the
today.
least. Huh?
Hopefully they regret it and have a change of mind today.
Hopefully they do. It was interesting because when I painted the mural at the Dahaba, when I actually was painting the mural, just the people that would come up to me and start talking to me. I had a guy who came up to me and he wanted me to take his picture in front of the mural with his dog.
Looks like we're frozen for just a minute, but hopefully her internet comes back and we'll be right on top of it again. Keelan, are you there? Well, while she is frozen, I can also mention a couple of things that if you're interested in things to do while you are stuck at home during COVID, you can. Oh, sorry. Looks like I need to switch over to video.
I'm back.
Are
I'm
you back?
sorry. My
Okay,
computer. Yeah,
that's
my
all right. I
computer
was
kind
just
of
going to
died.
mention a couple of things that people could do during
Okay.
COVID, so I'll finish that and then get
You
back to
mentioned,
you.
and I'll try to pull back up my video. So
Okay,
back in
so
a second.
things that you can do, Tempe Center for the Arts. If you go to tempecenterforthearts.com/Draw-A-Thon, you've got all sorts of links to other art videos, DIY projects that you can do at home or just enjoy to watch. We also, on our Facebook page, have tons of videos of performing arts from different local musicians. We also have Condor Dance did a performance on our Facebook Live. So that's under a program called Shift. And so you can find things to do with City of Tempe. Also, our friends over at the Edna Vile Art Center have classes and they're going virtual with their art classes right now. So you can do a lot of those things. Keelan, how's it coming with your video?
I'm almost there. I'm getting there.
Okay.
Okay.
While we're there, because we're at our last 10-minute mark,
Okay.
I'll
Gotcha.
let our folks know that also you can tune in next week on Wednesday, November 18th. And we have a lovely singer named Sandra Bassett, and she does jazz, R&B, blues, a little bit of everything. Soulful, smooth voice, and she is going to be our shift performer. So on our Facebook page, you can watch her live from 6 to 7 p.m. Again, that's on Wednesday with Shift program. And that's part of a virtual performing arts and visual arts series that we have going on. So please join us for that. If you look on the Tempe Center for the Arts webpage, you can also find future events like at the end of November, there's a comedy show coming up. I'm looking forward to that one. I love to laugh. And we'll be doing more things from the gallery at TCA. We miss you all terribly. And we can't wait to be in person again. But until then, we'll keep on bringing you virtual programs. So I'm going to ask Keelan a couple of questions while she's pulling
Okay.
her video.
I'm just trying to get where we were.
So Keelan,
yes,
you work with high school students all the time.
I do.
Yeah. What are some of the things that they have been doing as creatives to keep their mind and spirits up during
Oh,
COVID?
well, we definitely have been making a lot of art. It's a challenge. So we figure that, keeping the students busy, and trying to be creative, we do a lot of check-ins with them. When we have them in class, we do a lot of sharing, a lot more critiquing that we would ever do. It's interesting that my perspective of teaching has changed a lot, and kind of what we've done has changed as well. I find that students, some of my students really love being online because they feel safe at home. Other students, it's more of a challenge. And so we're trying to, work with those students. We have some of our students at school, just working remotely with teachers at home. We're thinking about, different ways that we can have small groups of students on campus at a time. So we're outside now that the weather's nice. We can do some outside social distancing, creative, great. We just have to be creative in what we're doing.
Yeah. And
But
I think that's for all ages. That
Yeah.
really, is to continue to work your mind and be creative, and that'll help all of us get through this. Um, the other thing that I was going to mention is, reaching out to other creatives, during this time, is find out what some of, if for you at home that are maybe haven't used Zoom before, or you're zoomed out, whatever that might be, is reach out and find out what your other creative friends are doing during this time, and share pictures and share information. You can do your own critiques with each other. You don't have to be an art student to do a critique with somebody.
Okay, can you see?
Yay, video.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. We had a nice little
I'm glad we
conversation.
made it
worked.
back. We got it. We got it. It's okay. I'm glad it was on video. It wasn't just like a completely dead silence from now on. So I'm just ending my drawing by adding more contrast and adding the darkness to the outside parts. And so that's how I'm. So you can see that kind of makes the interior more bright, but also frames the outside nicely as well. So we have just a few more minutes, huh? I think we should be fine though. I think we can make it to the end.
We can go over 3 o'clock by a couple of minutes if needed. So don't stress about that.
I know I broke up on my little story about the guy, but so anyway, I took his picture in front of this it was right when I finished that mural, and I took his picture and he came up to me. He said, "Well, my wife died a year ago, and that was like the first time I ever wanted my picture taken since she passed away." I was like, "That's really," but that's a lot. I mean, I felt like the huge power of like, number one, just having someone come up to you and like open up and tell you their story.
Yeah.
When you're an artist, people are like, "Oh, they'll talk."
Yeah. We get some good comments. We have exhibition spaces over at the Tempe post office on Mill Avenue in the windows. And every time we install a new exhibition there, people stop and say thank you and want to know like what's coming up next, and how it brings a smile to their face when they come and check their mail to see artwork, or they look forward to what's next. And a lot of us in museums, we're working behind the scenes. We're not really talking to the public as much, and things like that mean a lot. That your work is recognized as being meaningful in somebody's daily life.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I love those windows. I always go to see. I love the shape of them because they're triangles. I know
they're unique. Yeah.
I know they're a pain to hang in.
I won't say that, but
I
do have a couple more comments from the public.
Okay. Cool.
I've got Kelly who says, I love Keelan's work. And I believe that's Kelly from our marketing team. Hello, Kelly.
Hi, thank you.
And Beth Shook, who just finished her online workshop, she wants to know, do you make color choices intentionally before you begin, or are they intuitive as you work?
They're usually intuitive as I work, but there are times when I will pre-plan as well. So, but mostly it's, there was, when we went down into quarantine kind of mode, I did have like a select palette of pre-mixed paint. And I was like, I'm going to see how far I can stretch this palette in like a number of paintings and how I can make this palette look different, very unique and different from each other. So sometimes I will. There are certain colors that I absolutely love, love, love to use. And I know that those will be some of my go-tos. But when I'm drawing, most of the time when I'm drawing, it is an exploration of, you know, like what happens if I switch up this color with that color? Or, you know, I intentionally will try to maybe not go to some of the go-tos and try some things that are different. But I do say that I love fuchsia and I love pink. And whenever I can put it in something, I will try.
I'm totally shocked by that. Ha ha ha. You know, the other thing I notice, and I remember in my art school days that don't use black.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
And I tell
and
my students that too.
But you don't shy away from it in your own work.
You know, it's interesting because I heard that too. I heard that a lot. And I tell my students when we're learning about painting with oil, when we're using acrylic, you know, I felt like that instruction was very good instruction. And so I will tell my students, it is good to stretch yourself and not use black outlines in things because it teaches you about the contrast of colors and how to use color. And so I do feel that it's important at times not to use black, but you know, rules are meant to be broken. And I think I've broken every single one of them for myself. I had a professor that told me, I mean, I love him to this day. And I'm grateful for all of his advice, but he told me not to use fuchsia, not to paint like Georgia O'Keeffe. It was too decorative, and not to use black ever in a painting. But, you know, it was good advice for the time because it really made me stretch and look at my work in lots of different ways and not be so set on, I'm going to just do this one thing. So I'm very grateful that he gave me that advice because it made me go and try lots of different things and learn something different. But then, you know, then when I was navigating who I was as an artist, I found that I came back to those things, and that's okay too. I'm going to show you really quickly. We just did a couple painting projects in my class, and like one of them is we're shading a ball. There's some reflection, but so no black line, you know, no outlines really. And then this one was the other one where we're doing oil paint. So we're just studying warm and cool colors, you know, and how to shade with warm and cool colors. So yeah, I agree. It's good. It is good advice to, if you're planning to be an artist, there are times that you want to stretch yourself and say no outlines, but you know, again, there's no hard and fast rules to anything. It just depends on who you are and how you want to be an artist. Like with Beth Shook's work, like you don't want to put an outline there.
No,
You're
it doesn't work.
Working 100% with value and contrast and the detail of that. And that's what creates that wonderful drawing of the hair and how hair is represented. So in that case, yeah, no outline. So, but like I said, I do have a graphic design. In high school, I took 2 years of graphic design. They had a vocational school that I went to. And so I, at first thought I was going to be a graphic designer. So I do feel that, I went to ASU and decided to become a painter. And then somehow or another, these two worlds, like I didn't want to be a graphic designer because I didn't want to be, number one, always on a computer, but I also didn't want to be having to sell my work in like kind of a hard pitch sort of way. Like I'm not that type of person. So that's why I shied away. But it's interesting to see how some of that has merged back into my work.
So Keelan, maybe some advice for our creatives wanting to start a radial pattern drawing at home, and maybe they don't have a map, and they don't have a compass. Is I remember you talking about a string and a nail could work, or
You can.
a string and a thumbtack could work.
Right.
Do you think graphite pencil and things would be?
Oh yeah, I love, you know what? I love to use, and I love to use just cheap mechanical pencils as well. I love these.
Me
and
too.
on this because they're great because they're not very dark and you can erase really easily. With this guy though, I did just find things in my house and just traced them out. I just found random circles, traced them out, and then played with pattern.
That's a lot of fun. I like that one.
It was a lot of fun. I've also done it where like I've gotten like those like sections of like tree, they look like tree panels. It's like a section of a actual tree that's been cut out and it's about this thick. You can get them at Michael's, and you see all the tree rings inside of them. And so I've done that where I've traced all the tree rings and then put in patterns. This is what this drawing reminds me of actually, and then put in the patterns. It's really great if you have these, if you have gel pens to do that on the wood because it absorbs into the wood. It's very therapeutic. I had a friend that was in the hospital and I had all these little mini tree rings and I brought them and her, she was staying there, but her and a couple of my friends and we sat around and just did these we traced all the tree ring lines and made art, and it was very therapeutic and relaxing. So yeah, you can approach this in so many different ways. You don't need to have super sophisticated. Remember the one drawing I showed you, this is one, one of my first ones is I just freehand. You can even tell that circle's not even perfect. So, I finished my drawing. Bravo! so you can do this by hand if you want. Oh, I think I'm gonna put some dots in. I think that's the last thing I was gonna do.
Keelan, one more time, tell us your web address and how to find you online.
So my web address is www.kelanmanny.com. And my Instagram is, you can just look up my name and I'm right there. So you can just, if you don't remember, you can just take my name and Google search me and then you'll see a bunch of stuff will pop up. So you can see it that way too.
Excellent. So while we're watching the last bit here, I'm going to say thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah. And thank you. Sorry, I apologize for the technical glitch. I can just kind of fast forward a little, I think. I just traced out those circles and then I put a few more dots. So we can I'm going to fast forward just a hair more. So now you can see I'm just putting a few dots around there to soften the edge. And that's it.
That's lovely.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. It was lots of fun. I hope you make your own radial patterns and send in pictures so we can see them and celebrate them. I always learn so much because everyone has a different approach. So I'd love to see how you decided to create yours and see what you did.
I agree. It's always fun and it gives us a lot of joy, and it also gives us great info on what works and what doesn't with these virtual programs. Is what are you liking? What do you want to see more of? Do you want to share your work with others? And we want to hear those kinds of things. So, for those of you who are watching this program live or whether you watch it recorded, we want to hear back from you. We want to hear what kinds of programs you want to see. And let's give another round of applause to Miss Keelan. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. And also to Beth Shook. Yay. And two totally different artists with different drawing styles, techniques, subject matter, but both done in an easy to understand kind of way. And we really appreciate all of your time. So, Keelan,
Thank
have
you.
a great rest of your day. Thank
You
you for
too. Thanks
joining
for
us.
having me. Have a great day.
Say hi
Bye
to your
bye.
students. All
Yes,
right.
I will. Take care. See ya.
All right, folks, that's the end of Draw-A-Thon Senior Edition. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a lot of fun. I had fun talking to the artists. I hope that you had fun watching. I want to remind you again that the Tempe Center for the Arts has lots of virtual programs for you while we're all quarantined. And if you go on tempecenterforthearts.com, look for Shift, you can see what live programs are coming up in the future from Facebook Live. You can also link to our Draw-A-Thon page and see recorded videos that we have on our YouTube channel. We also, for you teachers out there or people of all ages that are just looking for DIY projects to do, under the gallery at Tempe Center for the Arts, we also have curriculum. So workbooks and projects and art activity ideas, all sorts of things for you. So we hope that you take advantage of those resources that we have for you. So again, thank you so much. I want to thank Cody, who has been our producer. Thank you so much for your hard work today and making this all go so smoothly. And thanks to our colleagues in TCA Marketing for putting the word out, and our colleagues over at the Pile Adult Recreation Center. Thanks for all that you do and continue to do for the people in our community. It is much appreciated. All right, folks, have a great rest of your day. Be safe out there. Be kind to one another. Bye bye.